Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Barr, for being here today. I'd like to ask you some questions about the legal standard for seizing and arresting protesters. Under the Fourth Amendment, it requires probable cause before you can seize and arrest a protester, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and the probable cause has to be particularized to a particular person. So if a protester was merely standing around in a crowd in the vicinity of someone else suspected of criminal activity, you cannot arrest that peaceful protester. In other words, there's no such thing as probable cause by mere association, correct?
Well, not strictly, but I'll say that, you do need particularized probable cause.
Okay, and if there's no probable cause,
if someone jumps into a getaway car
correct?
and there are 3 or 4 people in there, that might be enough to give you probable cause, just those circumstances. You don't need it on each individual.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Attorney General. If there's no probable cause, you can't arrest a protester, correct?
I said at the beginning, arrest has to be predicated on probable cause.
All right. Now, an arrest can also occur whether or not the federal official says it's an arrest. So, for example, if a federal officer takes a protester into custody, transport that protester, let's say, to a federal building, detains a person for questioning, that will constitute an arrest whether or not the federal official says the person is under arrest, correct?
Well, that would require a very intensive review of all the specifics involved.
Actually, it wouldn't. In the case of Dunaway versus New York, which is black letter law for over 40 years, the question was whether the police violated the 4th and 15th Amendments when, without probable cause to arrest, they took petitioners into custody, transported him to a police station, and detained him for questioning. The answer is yes, that would constitute an arrest.
No, the answer is that, Fourth Amendment is ultimately governed by reasonableness, and there can be circumstances. The question sometimes is, when does something actually become custody?
Reclaiming my time, this is not a trick question, Mr. Barr. I'm just citing you what the Supreme Court said. So here's the problem. Under this standard black letter law, which has been in effect for over 40 years, what the federal forces in Portland did was unconstitutional. Federal forces in full combat gear, in the dark of night, grabbed a protester who was peacefully standing there, forced him into an unmarked van, drove him to a separate location, searched him, detained him, and questioned him. That is what police states do. That's what authoritarian regimes do.
But I don't think those were the facts.
I haven't asked you a question yet, Mr. Barr.
Okay.
What the federal officials did was illegal because they didn't have probable cause. And how do we know that? Because Deputy Director of the Federal Protective Service, Chris Klein, admitted it on national TV. Deputy Director Klein said that the individual that they were questioning was in a crowd and in an area where another individual was aiming a laser at the eyes of officers. That's guilt by association. That's what the Fourth Amendment prohibits. Deputy Director Klein further stated that the protester was released after federal officials concluded, quote, they did not have what they needed, unquote, which again shows there's no probable cause. And it appears that Deputy Director Klein appears to understand that there was no probable cause because he essentially justifies that action as saying it wasn't an arrest. He calls it, quote, a simple engagement, unquote. I'm a former prosecutor. I've never heard that term, a simple engagement, because it's a made-up excuse. What these federal officials did was an arrest. They grabbed a peaceful protester, they forced him into a van, drove him to another location, questioned him. That is exactly what the Supreme Court prohibited over 40 years ago.
So
I obviously
don't know that.
I haven't asked you a question yet. In a Washington Post article on July 24th entitled Operation Diligent Valor, federal agents told reporters that there's no basis for these arrests. They said, quote, at times they have grabbed an individual and taken them inside the courthouse for questioning before determining that they had no probable cause to charge him with any crime, unquote. Deputy Director Klein said that they coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office on all of these arrests. I urge you to instruct your federal officials to comply with the Constitution, and I ask you to investigate these arrests because many of them are in violation of the Fourth Amendment. We do not live in a police state. We're better than that. I yield back.